Good morning. It is Wednesday, the 29th of June, and we continue the interesting events unfolding in the book of Numbers. We read today Numbers 22, verse 41. It's literally the last verse of chapter 22, and we read through to verse 12 of chapter 23. And it continues the story of the so-called diviner, a man of international reputation, Balaam, who has been contracted because some money has exchanged hands to the king, Balak. And what happens is that Balak is wanting to place a curse on Israel, and he is then going to attack because he decides that this is the only way he is going to defeat these people of God. If he had sat down and really thought about what he was doing, that these were the people of God, how dare he and how could he ever defeat them? But no, he's off on his own little mission. And that perhaps is a somber warning to us. Firstly, that as Christians, there may well be those hiding on the hilltops, in the ravines, plotting against us. But God is in control. And if we are faithful and obedient to God, then God will have our back, as it were. He will be protecting us. And we might be completely unaware of what's happening in the background, just as there is no indication that Israel was aware of what was happening. Not even Moses, tipped off, as it were, warned by God that some mighty spiritual battle was in fact taking place on the hills around them. And so Balak brings Balaam to the top of the hill, and Balak has sacrificed large numbers of animals. He gives some of them to Balaam. It would appear that this was probably not a live animal. This was a dead animal, because one of the forms of divination in those days was that of cutting the liver out of the animal and somehow poking it with your finger and determining somehow or the other quite what it was that the future would hold by looking at the liver of the animal. And Balaam then tells Balak to build 7 altars, and they sacrifice 7 different animals, cattle, I think, and sheep on those 7 altars. And then Balak goes off, perhaps carrying his little bag full of livers, to a barren place where he is going to discern the future. How interesting that for him, the future must be discerned in a barren place. Where God steps, there is fatness that drips, there is bounty and provision. So if you find yourself in a dry area, it's probably because God is not with you. Now, sometimes, let's just pause here, sometimes God puts you in a barren area to just test you and to grow you. So don't think that you are being punished or that God has deserted you, but it's a time for growth and preparation. Anyway, Balak waits, and Balaam has gone off, and then he comes back, and God has met with Balaam and has put words into his mouth. The extent to which Balaam is aware of what he's saying, we're not really told, but I suspect that Balaam is pretty much out of control here, just as he was when his donkey had to speak to him to tell him there was an angel of the Lord on the road and that the donkey had saved his life. Balaam is really just not really a diviner of any reputation whatsoever, let alone any kind of international reputation. God is utterly in control. And it's when you pause and look back, the commentators tell us that there are 7 oracles in total, and the number 7 speaks of completeness and wholeness and of God's presence and provision. There are 7 oracles in total, of which the first 4 are, we are told by the commentators, the most exquisite poetic and linguistic beauty. Now, is Balaam capable of that? Is he capable of stringing together 7 oracles when he doesn't know what the future holds? It seems highly unlikely. This is just really, for me, an indication that God is at work. Again, as I asked before rhetorically, to what extent does Balaam know that he's actually speaking to God himself, the God of gods, the Lord of lords? There is only one God. Is Balaam aware of that? We're never really told. And I suspect he knows that something's happening, but he's so used to listening to the demonic spirits that when another spirit, God himself, speaks to him, he simply regurgitates what he is told. Balak obviously is a little perturbed by this, and we will read tomorrow how it is that Balak responds. So the learnings from us is that sometimes we do not know what is happening around us, but let God be God and protect us. Let us be faithful and obedient to God, and let God do the rest. But also not to follow the first person who jumps up to say, I am a prophet, or I am a great preacher, or look at my international reputation. God will speak through whom he wishes to speak when he wants to speak. And we do not take upon ourselves the role of being this mighty man of God or woman of God to speak these words. So be cautious of those who run around saying, I'm a prophet, I'm a prophet. Rather listen to God's Holy Spirit to discern truly if this person is a prophet or whether he's a little bit like a Balaam, something of a charlatan. So folks, Christianity can be really interesting and quite tough, and yet at the end of the day, be faithful to God and obedient to his words, and there's not much you will need to worry about. God bless. We'll chat again tomorrow. Bye-bye.